Knowledge work requires the continuous conversion of raw data and expertise into high-fidelity judgments, decisions based on a precise understanding of complex variables, structured documents, and viable strategies. Most office environments still rely on an outdated industrial assumption. They assume that output scales linearly with time and technical skill. This assumption hides a severe paradox. Despite working long hours, professionals consistently report deep cognitive fatigue alongside a shockingly low volume of high-value output. Take two identical workers with the exact same time and skill. One produces a unified structural model. The other, operating under fractured working conditions, produces only a disjointed wireframe. Human attention, not time or skill, acts as the dynamic multiplier that determines the success or failure of modern work. Modern work environments have artificially cheapened distraction. We have socially moralized constant availability, treating it as a primary marker of professional responsiveness. This posture of permanent readiness creates massive, unmeasured operational costs that quietly drain an organization's bottom line through decreased intellectual rigor. To model how this value leaks away, we must analyze the mechanics of cognitive switching, the anatomy of distraction, and the performance metrics required to track focus. Fragmented attention represents a structural collapse of the brain's single-threaded executive function. The system that allows us to focus on one complex task at a time underloads it was never designed to carry. True multitasking in complex knowledge work is a biological impossibility. The brain doesn't process complex reasoning simultaneously. Instead, it rapidly alternates between targets. This alternation incurs a transition cost. The brain spends energy suppressing current rules just to load parameters for the next. Returning triggers a resumption cost, a mental delay to reconstruct context faded from memory. The most dangerous penalty is precision cost, a measurable drop in analytical rigor when a worker relies on mental shortcuts to compensate for broken logic. Across a single hour of responsive digital communication, these micro-penalties accumulate, draining the mental energy needed for high-value execution. The apparent speed of rapid task switching is an illusion. It masks a compounding degradation in total processing power. Transferring focus from one demanding task to another is rarely a clean, immediate break. The transition almost always leaves something behind in the mind. Attention residue refers to fragments of prior, unresolved tasks that remain active in your working memory, even after you have physically moved on. These unresolved fragments occupy finite cognitive slots, artificially restricting the bandwidth available for the demand currently in front of you. This residue directly degrades your analytical precision, leading to logic gaps and missed nuances in your professional output. As multiple incomplete exits pile up throughout the day, the mind becomes a crowded, noisy field that struggles to maintain depth on any single problem. This crowded mental state produces deep cognitive fatigue. The brain must exert continuous effort to suppress background thoughts, leaving it depleted by late afternoon. Professional exhaustion is the biological result of continuous cognitive reorientation and residue management, rather than the volume of work itself. To solve the problem of focus, we must map the behavioral anatomy that keeps workers trapped in a cycle of interruption. An internal trigger, a moment of cognitive discomfort or uncertainty in a complex task, precedes almost every distraction, long before a notification arrives. This internal discomfort creates a psychological opening for digital noise. The worker initiates a routine, escaping ambiguity by diverting to a low-value check, like an inbox. This provides a reward, momentary relief. Through repetition, the brain hardens this into an automatic avoidance loop. This habit loop provides a culturally acceptable disguise for compulsive task avoidance by mimicking responsive professional behavior. Chronic distraction functions as a highly trained, self-reinforcing system of psychological escape. Organizations often ignore the cost of focus because they believe attention is a vague psychological state that cannot be tracked. We do not need to measure brainwaves to manage performance. We can measure the operational decay left behind by fragmented focus using proxy metrics. The first proxy is the rework ratio. Fragmented work produces higher defect density, requiring extensive downstream repair. Next is uninterrupted task duration. If your schedule is shattered into 5-minute slivers, you never reach the immersion threshold required for complex problem solving. Completion depth differentiates between superficially touching a task and achieving finalized, deep execution. Work environments that prioritize constant switching and low uninterrupted duration don't just reduce efficiency, they systematically manufacture errors by design. Organizations will continue to misdiagnose systemic attention deficits as individual incompetence until attention is tracked as a hard operational parameter. Business cultures often operate on the assumption that speed and quality are natural enemies. Rapid replies create a false speed that masks significantly slower total completion times due to the massive downstream repair required to fix shallow logic. True velocity comes from clean first-pass execution, work modeled correctly the first time, without the need for endless clarification loops. Concentrated attention alters the mathematical relationship between how fast we work and how well we execute. This chart tracks speed versus quality. Initially, they are at odds, but notice the horizontal line. This represents threshold thinking, the minimum cognitive immersion required before complex problems yield. Once focus crosses this threshold, the speed and quality lines sharply converge, rising in lockstep. Beyond this threshold, speed increases because the mind stops leaking energy into irrelevant movement and switching. Disciplined attention creates a positive correlation between quality and speed, replacing the traditional trade-off between them. True focus requires an active, fiercely protected state of cognitive integrity. There is a brutal irony in the modern workplace. The very tools designed to speed up our work have become the exact mechanisms of our mental depletion. Optimizing knowledge work requires us to move beyond basic time management and instead build a protective cognitive architecture. Architecting environments that aggressively protect continuous attention generates true professional power.